Good morning. This session used to have a title. It's in the schedule, hardware, software, project. It's evolved quite. Now that entire title has been scrapped. It's just a graphic. So the plan is to talk about all of those things, but at any time, if you have questions, we can do that, and we'll leave some time to the end to talk about whatever. I'm going to show a lot of different things here. We're going to talk about this subject of project-based learning, which you may already know about, which is learning by doing, right? So a lot of this work is front-loaded. You oftentimes spend time prepping so that you construct a good project with good guiding questions, and then you take on the role as a facilitator where these things work. So a lot of these projects are like that, and we can talk about that at any different time. I want to talk about one of the oldest project-based learning, really one of the oldest algorithmic compositions I've ever heard of, which is by, do you know this hand? Remember this from music history class? Guido de Arezzo. Hey, Guido! So Guido's job as a monk was to teach all of the other monks how to sing. And he was an early music educator, and he came up with all these interesting project-based learning ideas and different types of tools to go along with that. And so that's another part of this session, is talking about the tools that you use, some that are existing, some you just devise a weird hand like this with writing on it to do that. But we're all creative people. Making tools, using tools is all part of what we do. So one of my favorites that he did was, so the treble clef didn't exist at the time, but if you can just forgive me that, imagine some notes on the lines and the staff like this. So he would give the monks in the monastery some notes like this, and then he'd say, okay, go find some passage of scripture from the Bible that means something to you. And so then there's a first activity, and then he said, okay, so we've constructed a couple different kind of plots like this. Now set those words from the scripture to the notes, right? So you might get something like this. Well, he sets the vowels to it first, actually. So that's what we're going to sing. So that's part of the algorithm. And then you get the text, the Kyrie eleison, for example, and then you match up your syllables with the vowels that you would sing. So interesting to think that, I mean, this is a non-digital tech, music tech, but this is a thing that actually happened, and I'm not like embellishing it or dressing it up. Like, this is how it went. So then you get something, if you reduce it, you just get these notes. You went from this to this other thing. And back in the day, which was a Wednesday, they used to then sing these notes in a melismatic way. They would hold these notes. As for Guido's role, now we have something that we can talk about in terms of a compositional idea, right? So he doesn't have to say, like, well, first come up with this and then do that. It's not this very prescribed thing. You get a student that says, like, you know, I like this, I like what I did here. They say, okay, let's figure out some ways to either continue with this literal generation of notes like we've done, or we can talk about some other ways to embellish it or change it or make deviations on it. And that's a really good place to be with a project-based learning activity, because it shows that, you know, the students done their work to figure out what they want to do, what aspects of this they see themselves in, but also it helps Guido and you and us, all of us, to be in a position where we can draw on expertise and experiences and not have to do as much hand-holding, but really be not a source of wisdom is really a good way to say it. It's kind of cool, right? All right, so here's another non-tech digital thing. You've ever seen these things before? It's called chord files. This is a newer company. I'll pass these around. Can you pass this one? Here, let me illustrate. Sorry, to take it right now like that. So you start off with, I can do it from the slide. Yeah. You start off with a chord like this, and then you say, all right, I'm going to make a song, right? I want to make some new thing here too. So you have it all laid out for you. Here are the secondary dominants up there. Here are some ideas for chords that would be in a suitable chord progression. If you want to do So mode mixture, there are some other things there. If you use these sliders here, it'll move this paper cardboard. I mean, I like this. It's cool. It's different. But you move this up, and then it changes all of these things. And you could figure out how that works pretty simply, just looking at the mechanical idea. But it's interesting and very useful music tech. And one of the things I want to just draw a point to right now is that, like, some human being made that. Like some person thought, this is really going to help me do either what I want to do really well, or in a teaching capacity, it's going to help. And that is a great thought. And you all have unique ways of doing things that you do, I'm sure. And you have your own little bag of tricks, how I talk about scales or whatever. And not every human in the world has that, by the way. I'm just going to tell you, not everybody knows what you know about that. So don't lose sight of that. And in fact, lean into it, I'm going to say. You can make little tools like this that help you do you as spectacularly as you can. And anyway, so technology is great like that. And it doesn't have to be digital technology either.
What is that called?
It's called chord files. Yeah. You can find it. They targeted me on Instagram. Okay. And I just went with it. Yeah, I was I was resistant to it, but because on principle, I felt like I didn't want to give them that. I don't want to do it. But I was like, it's a really good idea, I think. I think it's really good, so that's that. All right, so here's other technology that you may have heard before. And we could talk about these things. I don't mean to make this sound routine, but MIDI controllers and cables and all sorts of other stuff. It costs substantially more than the paper thing that I just showed you, but this is all there. Maybe in a classroom you might just need that, like headphones and a dongle. That might just be some of the stuff. I'm going to show you a little bit. Oh, this is great. So in addition to teaching at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, I also teach a summer camp in the summer, and it's for middle school kids, so 10-year-olds, and it's now a free camp that's funded by this grant that I have. But the goal of the camp has been, it's got to be for people who don't know anything about music, who want to get into this, and then they show up. So I partner with the Worcester Boys and Girls Club, and so they come to campus. It's their first experience being on a campus like that, so it's kind of magic. It's great. We all eat together. It's the first time seeing college kid food, which it's still not lost on me after all these years, right, that whole thing. So the whole experience is quite magical, but we, in lieu of them knowing anything about music, we use tech-based tools, some things we make for the camp, just to get them kind of into this headspace. So here are some people on a sound hunt. So the activity here is they're using, you can see this little handheld recorder, and they're recording interesting things. They're beating up that tree, but they're recording all of these sounds that they find interesting. That's the real prompt. And then we're going to bring these into GarageBand later on and do something, maybe weird, something. So here's, so it winds up being like that. So you get the idea of kind of how that goes. That's one activity that we do. You've seen these types of things before. That's an introduction to a DAW for your average 10-year-old. I've not used this particular tool, but this is Groovy Music. Maybe you've used this before. This is sort of the companion for younger kids. And there are all sorts of DAWs out there in all shapes and sizes and varieties. And you find the one that you like and use that. The other thing that we use in this camp is the one that you already know about, Soundtrap. Does everyone know Soundtrap? Okay, all right, so I'm going to go through that thing. All right, so we make a fair amount of technologies for this camp, and also I'll tell you that the the people I'm most interested in at conferences like this, and just other teachers in general, are people who are also making their own things, because it's part of a tradition that we all have in us. Every time, thank you. Every time you've modified your instrument in some way, or you had an idea about a tool that you wanted to make, that's part of the tradition of being a musician. I have an idea of what I want to do, and maybe there's nothing out there that exists, or maybe I need to adapt something to really facilitate my idea, but I need to make a thing to do that. And that's great. You're part of that tradition, and so am I. And so any way that you can do that, I think that's an advantage here. This was the Makey Makey, in case you've not seen it. It's an Arduino-based thing, if you know those types of things. It's a microcontroller, and you do things, but then you get to step on or touch a Jello thing, and it does something. We could talk about that and do kind of a deep dive into that. Let me explain to you a little bit about the things that we do in our lab that are not things that, like ideas of my own or our own thing. So we wound up doing a lot of work for people who have ideas but need the technological facilitation to make it happen, which is very interesting for me, because I hear a lot of other people, like, I think my ideas are strange, but like the ideas that come in. So these were musical cubes we did for someone. So this artist I thought he wanted to roll dice in order to make it happen, but we also built in these gyroscopic sensors that, depending on where you're holding it, it's sending different control data. It also does my idea. So I'll have a phone conversation with someone, and I'll say, I want to do like musical dice, music cubes. And so, I'll think a certain thing about that. And so my thought was, okay, roll the dice, and then depending on which side is up, it plays a different clip or something like that. That it does that, but this other person's idea was, I also want the motion too. So while it's changing, it's also controlling all that stuff. So you can't go to Guitar Center and buy something like that. It's an interesting idea. Maybe right now, when I explained that concept, you thought of a way that you might want to use that in a classroom setting. And it's fine if you didn't, but if you did, that's you got that thing that and you all have that thing, like that spark of, with the right context and the right instruction, I could create some kind of project-based learning activity where people learn something and explore something new at the same time. When I'm talking with undergrads, the project-based learning activity is not just the thing. Mostly it's about the tool to make the tool, too. That's also a project-based learning activity, and one that is outside of my area of expertise. So all my degrees are in music, and now I have some experience with microcontrollers. That was not something that I grew up with, but it's not so foreign. The things that I see myself in most often when we do a project are the musical things, like how it's going to create a musical experience for someone. But the students that I work with, or the people that work in my lab, they see themselves in, and they see the beauty in, I've selected the right microcontroller for this job, or I wrote the code in an elegant way that's going to allow us to build on it. And that is something that in the last 10 years or so has become very meaningful to me, to hear other people talk about the art in their code. And sometimes I was with this computer science person one time, and they were saying, I don't want like some industry person telling me like how I need to express myself through my code. I was like, wow, like 90% of that is exactly the way that like all my friends talk about music. So it's very interesting. So we're a lot more similar than we are different in terms of that type of thing. This is another one. So there's this jam band called Disco Biscuits. I don't know if you've ever heard of this band. You know them? So they're a big deal if you're into that kind of scene. So they approached me about doing a system. So here's the deal with Disco Biscuits. They all live in different parts of the country, and they get these huge gigs, but they don't all practice together. In lieu of doing these types of Zoom sessions or whatever, the Bluefish or whatever the heck that thing was that we have, what was it?
Bluefish,
What is it? Lutefish, yeah, okay. So because they're heavily improvised, something will happen. They have like 100-something songs. They're one of these bands, and they all have quirky names, and then somebody will call out, we're going to do raccoon, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they do the thing. And then like someone else will be like, let's do fugue. So they need to, and very improvised and very progressive, so they need some sort of system that was going to help them perform that way. So we made this thing where they can just drag in all of their files. They have more than 4. So you drag it in, and then it will show all of their things in there, the shimmy fugue. So here's how it works. So like they click go, and then it'll count them in at tempo, and then they all practice doing the thing. This is like a simulation of what it would be like for them to practice. So the drummer practices with this, and then the singer. So they'd be playing along with their track at this point. And then conceivably, in their minds, the audience would be applauding, while it randomly cues up then the next one from their list. So they're practicing just being ready to go off the cuff with very little prep, like, oh, we're doing fugue next. And then if you need to practice it again in this system, they could go and do that. So again, like that's for me as a music educator, that's a very interesting way to practice. I can see why it works for them. I don't really know of anyone else that practices that way, any other ensemble that practices that way. But they needed a tool that was going to help them work for the way that worked for them. And again, you can't buy that from Sweetwater, so that's a pretty interesting way to do it. This is another product that I think is pretty interesting. This is Jambox. I started working with, it's a wind controller for paraplegics. So I started working on this project. This was an existing company, but I worked with them in 2009, and now I'm working with it again. So it's like a harmonica, except it just sends potentiometer data, and it is for quadriplegic people. So this man, Dave Whalen, who's the founder of the company, has a spinal cord injury, but wants to play music in a sophisticated way. You shouldn't be hearing music now, but we had an early prototype that use these things. It literally just sends 3 streams of numbers, and then you can map it to whatever. And we're expanding. We're actually working on this again in my lab. But it's a good idea, and it's an interesting type of tool. When you think about how it actually works, it has a tilt thing, so that sends something. It has a slider, horizontal thing, and it says breath, so puff and sip. Any kind of when you think about it in terms of its prime elements, not that sophisticated. But when you think about the potential of what it can mean for someone who has very limited mobility, there's a lot of potential. And he's an ideas man, so he has all sorts of ideas for different ways to do it, different ways that he can make this thing work, not just like a harmonica. So there are a lot of things out. Oh, this is the thing I wanted to show you. So we made this in my lab. This is called Squidbox. It has a PlayStation controller, which lets you switch between chords, notes, and drums. I have it set here. I'm getting a little latency from the Bluetooth speaker, but I can still make it happen. So there are diatonic chord functions. One, so if you wanted to play. And then if you wanted to make it go to like just scale notes, you could do that. And then if you wanted to transpose it, like you just do this, and now we're in. Right, so now we're in another key. So, yeah, it's kind of cool. Yeah, you want to see it? Yeah. So, yeah. This is a lot of fun. Oh, so the genesis of this idea was for that summer camp that I was saying. Like, they come in and they get into sound trap, but they don't know, they run to the trap of not knowing chords. So I did a lot of things with like making MIDI things that were like chords they would drag in, but it wasn't working quite, the way I wanted it to. Anyway, so now we have a bunch of these, and we're making one that actually has a cover on it, so it's not just an exposed microcontroller. But you can press the buttons too. That's fine. Yeah, nobody wants to make it. Well, I don't want you to, but like you can. You can. No, it plays a chord. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. The dial is good. That PlayStation gimbal means so much to me. I mean, it just controls the menu, but it's very special. You know, I think just for what it is, just the look of it alone. So, you getting it? Yeah, I know. It's great. Yeah, it's fun. So anyway, we're gonna do the summer camp this year with a bunch of these things and have it playback chords. We're gonna sell a kit too, in case you want that. Not that this is a commercial, but we have a bunch of. I forgot I did that. So that's how that works. So this is rock, rap, and roll, Dave. Rockrapandroll.com, not N with the little hyphen. That's what it is. There's a lot of people were putting in that little, you know.
It's not on the web anymore.
No, it is at rockrapandroll.com. If you put in.
I went there.
Spell out and roll, not and roll, and it'll get you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
people put the apostrophe in. It's calamitous. It's like, you know, it won't work. Anyway, so that's it. It's not mobily formatted, and we're probably going to get a cease and desist because it's literally just the exact same thing with the same samples. There was this one sample though. Like if you go to the what is it? Technopop one, it says something about like something booty crack. It's some kind of rap. I didn't know it was in there, but then everyone found out that it was in there, and they're 10, so like it's very funny, to have that sort of thing. So anyway, that's up there too. Okay, so there was a person from your home state, Les Paul. Pride of Waukesha, also lived in my home state of New Jersey. So in our lab, we looked a lot to this person. He was a musical innovator, he was an inventor, he came up with a lot of interesting ideas. We have a grant with the Les Paul Foundation. And a lot of the things that we wind up doing and making project-based learning activities are in recreating some of his early inventions. So this rusty-looking piece of railroad track that you see in front of you, a young Les Paul was walking through Waukesha one day with his friends and found this piece of discarded track outside of his house, and next to this rail station near his house. And he thought, I'm looking for a dense piece of material to make a musical instrument. Like there's a certain kind of myth about guitar bodies, and if they are heavier, more dense, that they will give more sustain. So he was barking up that tree at a young age. He took the thing home. By the way, these are wildly toxic. So like just we found it because I thought like, oh, okay, let's get a bunch of people together, and they're like, Manzo, like that'll kill you. It was like, it's like, okay, so we're not going to get a real piece of the track. So we wound up taking like something. We made like a model. I'll show you that in a second. But anyway, the story is that Les and his friends pulled this thing out of like a piece of the river, and pulled a piece of this track out. They tied a nail to it. They put a string on it, and then when you pluck it, it made a string instrument sound. His mom saw it and said, like, well, that's pretty good, Les, but it's not really feasible because you don't have tuners on it. And also you should figure out some way to amplify it because that's kind of like the big deal. So this is like in the 1930s, and so she let him then take apart their old phone, to make a pickup out of it. And I thought, like, wow, like I want to be like Les Paul's mom, like, just like helping to facilitate just take apart our phone. And they were poor; they didn't really have anything, so that was a big deal for them to just do that. In the same camp, and just also with undergrads at WPI, we made. I thought that was a really good idea, and I thought we could make a model and 3D print these things. Do you ever do any 3D printing? That's kind of fun. So then we show people about how 3D printing works. Oh, so we made them out of that's my contribution. We're gonna make it out of glow-in-the-dark filament. There's no real tie-in at all. There's no reason to make it other than it glows in the dark and it makes everything kind of mad when you do it. But anyway, So can I go forward? Yeah, there we go. So so then they're losing their minds. And then we put this is your Amazon pickups we put on there. We show them how to string it up. We use locking tuners because it's just easier. But then they can record with it. And that is like a very low cost way to make a musical instrument. I mean, you're hearing the non-digital version of that too, but like if you put enough effects on that, then that can sound like, Sonic Youth or something like that. It could be pretty wild. That is also a great way to then talk with a 10-year-old about tuning and intervals and wonderful things, which is the place we want it to be. I only have them for like a week, and so it's great. They also learn the mechanics of changing a guitar string after they break it. I will tell you too that we had a whole thing where we used to plug in a bunch of guitar pedals into amplifiers. Now we just do the headphone thing. Like that was a lesson learned. I could embrace the chaos for only so long. I have a pretty high threshold, but the people on my team were not having it there too. So we actually do a lot of things with Les Paul in my lab. I think he was a really interesting person who came up with a lot of interesting ideas. So this is not a plug for him by any means or the Les Paul Foundation, only to say that there are a lot of interesting people that were embracing novel projects, and we don't just have to think entirely of our own thing. There are ways to modernize those things. So Les Paul had this, we call this the Les Paul Varizer, but he, back in the day, had this show gimmick that he would go out on stage with his guitar, and he'd have this thing, something like this on his guitar, and say, I came up with a thing called the Les Paul Varizer, and you press a button and it plays a drum sound. So it didn't work. It was just like a prop. So backstage, you would hear this drummer like do this thing, and then he'd be like, "Can I press another button and hear a bass sound?" And again, this is like the '40s, so it was a different time. In the '80s, he actually made one with the company Ampex. They came up with this long electrical cord that went backstage and played back a bunch of tape decks, and it was a thing. So now we have. I'll show it to you, but. You can go to this website and take a look at it too. There it is. Wait, hang on. Gotta find that one.
Do I want?
Oh, that wasn't the one. All right, I'll find it later. But it was. No, it was the '90s were a different time. So see, Dave, it is up there. All right, connect to MIDI. I think this will work. Color-coded buttons, so and then you can take them back out. So it just does that, like it just like starts. So the idea would be that you would play something or construct these. You might make your own things to go in here and construct a backing band for yourself or some things that you trigger yourself. Sometimes I just let this play on its own. So my students made their own. This one's kind of out there, I think. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but it's anyway. It does a certain thing. How might you use this in a classroom? Think about that. It's kind of simple when you think about what it does, but what it does, works out pretty well. You can come up with, you have a clear project. You're going to make some piece, make a bunch of patterns for yourself that you might play along with in some way, and you don't have to play them all at one time. You can construct it over time, and you'd be surprised with even just these default ones that are up there, how many novel performance things you can get out of just that. With somebody else singing on top of it or playing on it. So I'm very interested in those types of ideas. Yeah, that's what's working. Cool. Okay. Oh, that was a museum installation. Yeah, we have this set up in Waukesha if you happen to be in the area anytime soon. Or you're also from? Yeah. Just pop in. On your drive. Your drive's already long enough as it is. Anyway, stop over in Waukesha. So that's that. So anyway, that's a little bit of what our lab is all about. We make Okay, so these didn't exist. So this is, that's another point. Like, because this doesn't exist and I wanted to do this, like, we have to make these things. And you can do that too. That might seem a little far-fetched, but you can actually do that same thing yourself. The novel idea is the most critical and important thing, and kind of the rare thing. Figuring out the tech stuff is just it's a little bit more rudimentary when you think about it, because you can find a pathway forward. It took us a bunch of different cracks to iterate on this to get it to be like this. If it was just me working by myself, it would have taken a lot longer, but I had a team of people working with me in the rat lab, the researchers and technologists, the rats, and they're all like us, like they're into this sort of thing, so it's kind of fun. There's no ideas taken off the table because it's too out there. Hence you see like music cubes and things like that, but you could make something like that on your own. Same thing with the squid box. That took wherever that went. Did I say it was called the squid box? Yeah, okay. By the way, you've been holding it for a while. Take a look at the back of it, because it's color change 3D filament. Is it white, like where you were holding it? Oh, okay. It must be very cold. Yeah, emotionally. Yeah, I get how it goes. I had asked or put on the thing to check out the guitar, the pedal thing. I don't know if you saw that reading. It was the video link on the prep material. Okay, so we made a whole kit for making effects. I wanted to have this experience. So at WPI, it's the university where I teach, we don't have majors, or we don't have many music majors. We have people that are majoring in biomedical engineering or computer science or mechanical engineering, but they love music. They've been playing music since they were little, and they still want that to be part of their life. So I don't have a single music major in my lab. They're all into these other things. It doesn't really matter. The interest in developing tools like this is the thing we wanted to do. I personally wanted to make a series of project-based learning activities that were based on that, number one, would get people into programming in this language called Max, which is a visual programming language that is optimized and kind of geared toward music making. It's somewhat ubiquitous in university settings. Composers and visual artists, interactive media artists tend to use Max a lot. But I wanted to make a series of project-based learning activities where other people would get into this. And the mechanism by which they were going to get into this was going to be, we're going to make an effect in software, and then we're going to push it onto hardware. So the unromantic stuff that happened in the background was we had to come up with a way to get that to happen, to get the software to shake hands with the hardware and make it so that it all works. But we figured that out, and I'm not even going to gloss. I'm going to gloss over it now because it's a thing. You just figure it out, and you put enough pots of coffee on, and you figure out that part of it. The part to stay focused on is what's the experience like. So now we have this. Well, we did a lesson in one of my classes where we took a song and said, okay, go make that effect, and then go run your own piece of software to run on this hardware that uses that effect. And then that worked out well. We then did a pilot of an event called a hackathon, where we were going to show people how they can make an effect in one day. People who didn't have any idea how to do this, we're going to crash course do it. I asked a bunch of other people, like in a lab, like, can you help be coaches for this thing? Like, yeah. So we none of us knew what we were doing, and that's another part of this. We don't want to talk about that, but like we didn't know how it was going to go. That's why we did a pilot first, and it wasn't a disaster. It was actually a lot of fun. And then now we do this event every year. If you're around in the Worcester, Massachusetts area on April 5th, you can come by. But we...
The FX Hackathon combines an audio effect showcase with an analog and digital effect build-off. In this one-day event, the student teams work with coaches to create interesting audio effects, while guests meet pedal makers, try out new sound boxes, and play other music-making devices. There's also a repair station where you can learn how to fix your broken pedals. Open to the public, no cover charge. Visit fxhackathon.org for more information.
That was it, 30 seconds. So you might notice that the the word guitar was left out of that altogether. It's not just for guitarists, it's for anybody, and pedal was also left out of it, so we're leaving the term effect kind of broad. But teams work together to make a thing. We have other sorts of sensors and expression controllers that are there too. They wind up outfitting either a guitar or, in this case, electric harp. We have an electric harpist that hangs out with us, and then we make a thing together. So even in this one-day activity, it's an interesting opportunity to make a cool project and learn a whole lot about how software works, how hardware works, how you sort of work, as a musician. That's you make some pretty good judgments about how you might play with this effect. So that's probably one of the newer things that's going on there too. All right, I would like to take some questions now and talk about some. That's me. You already have my information, but you could just have that as well in case you want to talk about these things further. But this is a lot to look at, and I would love to hear some of your thoughts about any of this or parts that might apply to the work that you're doing. Yeah.
You kind of touched on this topic about MIDI as a form of differentiation for disability. Would you, and some of my other professors have said we don't go to MIDI as a last resort, try and keep them on acoustic. So what's your opinion of that? And do you think MIDI leads to as equitable a musical experience in a mostly acoustic ensemble, or would you try and keep them on acoustic and use MIDI as a last resort?
You're saying MIDI? Is that the word you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I just couldn't hear it. So
sorry,
yeah.
That controller, it's essentially a MIDI controller.
Yeah.
That you just load up samples and then you use the potentiation from the device to create.
Yes. Right. I think I understand your question. So you're saying, do I have a preference on an acoustic, traditional acoustic instrument versus something like this? I view.
Or the harmonica.
Yes, the jam box. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. If you look at human history, all of the different technologies that were available throughout human history. This is going to sound philosophical, so just buckle up. But you think about what was happening at different times. Early aerophones and drums, this was what we had back then. As things progressed, you think about the violin. There are not many moving parts on the violin, really. You have the tuning pegs. Later on, we added fine tuners, but even the strings were gut at the time. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution. Right now, we have pulleys and hammers, so the piano becomes a ubiquitous instrument. So if you think about each different period of humanity and how technology has grown, there have been people who have pushed the boundaries and said, we ought to go in this direction, and we need to make instruments to do this. There are also people who said, hey, this is new and cutting edge, and I can see how this would apply to my work. So that is just the terrain of how it has been so far. When I think about digital technology and how inexpensive it is if you're already in an environment that is embracing digital technology, to add more software to things, that seems like a great thing. There's this other side of it where if you don't already have a computer, then you're at a disadvantage. So when I think about the students that I work with, particularly for this camp, because they're not coming from great means all the time, I can't really control for that, but I sense that. They have Chromebooks at home. That's the one thing, the one bit of technology that I know that they have, because in Worcester, every student gets a Chromebook. So that's why that Squidbox thing that you saw that connects through Soundtrap through Bluetooth. That is the reason why that exists the way that it does, connecting wirelessly for that exact purpose, for that audience. The Jambox thing, they have the physical movements that are available to someone with a spinal cord injury are so minuscule that you really can't rely on the resistance of a traditional instrument in the same way. It would take a lot, is what I'm saying, for them to do physical, to do the physical motions required to produce air. Philosophically, just me in general, when I think about instrument design as it is, you used to have to design a double bass to be enormous in order to produce that sound. That's not the case any longer. We don't have to think about the design of instruments in terms of the sound that they're going to produce. As you know, sometimes the physical design of an instrument, what's required to play it, can be restrictive, and it can. I have a certain type of frame that it is somewhat preclusive from me playing other types of instruments. Not to say it's impossible, but it is more challenging. And if you can take that barrier away by designing something else that can just be like this, or it can just be on a slider that's controlled by breath, that many times takes a lot more work and much more thought, because you have to think about the user experience. But the benefit is pretty considerable. Did that answer some of the question? Or
Yes.
all? Okay, cool. All right, thank you for that question. Other thoughts? Yeah.
So I love all of those devices and gadgets that you and the team do. So I work with elementary and middle schoolers, and I know that sometimes when I give them like activities or use technology, I'm not sure if this is the right way to do it, but I spend a couple time, maybe like a day, describing the software, how to use it, or showing them that. As a part of this project, we had to tell, we're organizing. We had to talk to the teachers that have their music technology programs. And so I spoke to the Hine at NYU and New School, and he says with his college students that he just has them jump in and then they just kind of solve their problems by themselves. And he notices that they tend to be very resourceful and they help each other. So how would you suggest devices that look complicated, even though they're easy to use as we touched and felt around, how would you suggest that we go about that with younger students?
That's a great question. If you'll allow me to look on my computer for one thing real quick. I don't know if I have it here. Super Mario. Oh man, I hope I do. Super Mario. I got it. All right. Are you gonna play? He might be offline. Hang on. Come on, Dropbox. Don't do this to me. You're embarrassing me in front of all my friends. Okay. Oh no, that's not it. Hang on. Hold that hype. This is the one I want. Anyway, so this is Super Mario. You see it crawling? Okay, it might not come through. Anyway, it was going to be about informal music learning, and video games are designed oftentimes to be not a lot. Well, you played games before. Some of them don't have any instructions at all. The stuff that I was playing early on as like a kid. Are you going to go? It's quite beautiful if it happens. All right, it's fine. Anyway, you ever played a game where it has like all this instruction about like how things? It's so annoying. So I feel like it's a design thing. So when we're designing these types, like there's not a whole lot to mess up here, So we designed this when we did this installation here. It was, you can't see it on the actual guitar, but it's just that on the guitar. So if you have an intellectually curious kid or their parent and they see this on there, brightly colored, by the way, these keycaps come off. Oh, you can put your own on there. I know. I have a calcifer one for, if you know Howl's Moving Castle. I have that on there one time too. So who's not going to touch that? So I feel like there's a design thing that can help to put in the constraints to make it so it does that. Now, having said that, the stuff that I design for my own use tends to be bare bones and look like that. If you are 10 and you pull up something that looks like this, even that, to me, that is pretty intimidating because you don't know what exactly it's going to do. I have this lesson where I just say, like, this is my introduction. If you press the space bar, it starts moving through the timeline, and it says, and it plays back all of your great ideas. Oh, I don't have any great ideas. And all the kids laugh, and it's great, and it's wonderful. But when you open this up, you've got this happening, and, like, I don't know what that is, but it's brightly colored, so I want to click on it, but then it brings me to the thing. it's a lot, you know, so I tend to not like the design of a lot of these things when I'm dealing with younger students. To draw a comparison, when you open up Ableton Live, oh, there we go, all right, fine. All right, fine, we'll hear it, it's open. So here's you playing Mario. You don't know what you're doing, and then like this. Okay, so I just learned something. I had a good learning experience having run it. Don't touch that Goomba. And then, look at how beautiful this is. You know you have to jump over the Goomba, and as soon as you jump over the Goomba, you hit this little block which had a mysterious question mark on it that looked daunting. But now I also know, based on that sound and based on this 200, that I've been rewarded. So I need to jump over that bad thing, and also I have to hit these question marks whenever I can. And then it goes on further, and like, all right, I don't know what the hell that is. Oh my God, there's a mushroom, and then I can't go back. So like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. Oh, and also I can break bricks. So you learn a lot of things informally from the design of a good system like that. And I think that's a great system. Because what else is there to learn? Except there's a dragon, and you have to save the princess, but then your princess is in another castle. So if you design a system like that. Now, here is the other thing. And I deal with computer scientists all the time. Getting them to intuitively design something like this, I mean, to me, this is way too many buttons still. You know, and doesn't have a whole lot. It just has like a play button that's color-coded to this and a browse button so you can find which file you want to play. But like this, I don't know, it's too much. In this, I don't know that people need to have that information there, but it's a simple UI. A lot of times when people want to design something, it looks like, well, open up anything by Microsoft, and you see, you know, and like, not to speak disparagingly about them, but to say, it's like patchwork quilt. You know, they come up with a new feature and it just becomes appended to a menu or something else that you used to rely on being one place. I mean, part of the reason why I got into designing my own stuff was because I'm a professional. I can't go and rely on these tools that are changing every time some person decides that, oh, we need a new ribbon layout. You know, how many classic ribbon layouts do we need? So, anyway, I'm kind of iterating on my response, but did that speak to some of what you wanted? Okay. Other thoughts about this? Yeah.
I'm thinking about something like the polarizer right here.
Yeah.
Being kind of related to main stage. Can we make main stage more like this, or it's just really complicated? Or
So-
I find it overwhelming. Maybe I don't use it enough.
No, I am right with you. So I play in a 70s and 80s progressive rock cover band, recreationally. I have, for my own use, I have this giant Max Ableton thing that I use for my own sounds that we won't talk about, but our keyboard rig is all built in main stage. And you really have to beat the hell out of it in order to make you do what you want it to do. I know, that's, it is not just you, it's not just you, yeah. And I like Apple products, but I have a very, very difficult relationship with them for the things that I just mentioned, is that a lot of times things change, and then the stuff that I did doesn't work anymore. And again, like, we're all professionals, it's hard to rely and trust on a company that does that to you. So I don't really trust them on that. By contrast, the programming language that I use, Max, you know, when you open it up, they're on Max version 9 now. You can still open up projects from Max version 4, and they look pretty much the same. They function pretty much the same. That's a company that I can trust to do that. Ableton also, to some degree, if you use that, when you open up an old project, if they've upgraded their compressor or their distortion, they'll say, do you want to keep using the old version, or do you want to upgrade to it? And you have at least some choice to that. But how many times do I need to get, oh yeah, so here's Max. Anyway, this is programming in Max, if you've ever seen it. There's no paperclip telling, oh, it looks like you're trying to run a program, you know, like that Microsoft thing. You can, if you know the name of like objects that you would want to do, like a button, for example, like you can just say that. And buttons are so common inside of Max, you can press the letter B and you can get more of them here. And then there's this other, and data flows from one object to another. So you make connections like this. Okay, so it's less intimidating than maybe your average programming environment because it's graphical. If you're used to plugging in bits of gear anyway, like pedals or effects or speakers or whatever, this is kind of like home. So if you lock this now, you can't add any more objects to it, but you can interact with them. So this is UI thing. So you can actually explain to students in a way, or yourself, that this is how data flows from one thing to another. And then the more parts of the language you know, random, and I'm going to say generate, you have the ability to generate random numbers between 0 and 127. That's a total of 128 numbers. And then here, I'll take another button here. So, wow. So now it just is generating random numbers, right? In this particular language that I'm quite fond of, if you click on the help file for anything, you can get like a working example of that, and that in itself can be unlocked. So you can make whole programs just from like ripping off the help files, which is like really kind of nice, you know? I don't know of any other programming language that does that. I got into this in a class when I was in grad school, and the person was presenting on, it was a topic in synthesis. It wasn't even about this piece of software. He just used this to demonstrate the way that sine waves work together. And I was like, what is happening here? And and I haven't had a good night's sleep ever since. It was just a really interesting thing. I'll show you this since we're this far in anyway. You can say I want any incoming number, I want to treat that like a pitch, and then I'm going to give it a default velocity value of 127. I'm going to let the note last for half a second. I happen to know that that's what this object does, but that's good. And then here's the last part of it, which is this note out object is what lets it communicate with your computer's sound card. So now if you press this button, it does that, right? And then if you, I'm not going to go out of control here, but if you wanted to, so this is like a little kit that I made that does like filtering. I'm going to rip it off real quick just to show this. So if you take this, so this gets it so that if you do if you play a note, so that's like C, E, and then G, but I have it set to C major, so if I play an F sharp, it says, I think you mean F. So it filters it in there. So if we were to take this thing, this was something that I made this in Max, and a big part of what has helped me be me has been that I've done this stuff. I wrote a book on Max too, and that propelled my career in a different way that I'm quite thankful for. So anyway, so now if I say you're in G major, so now, right? So it's something, you know? Okay, I don't know how we got on the subject of Max, but now I feel like we've gone someplace together. Other thoughts about this? Oh, we're over time. Oh, I should, yeah. Final questions, thoughts about things? We can talk about this anytime, too. I like talking about this stuff. Any final thoughts? Thank you for your time.